We begin in the United States, where President Joe Biden's announcement that he is dropping out of the presidential race has set off a political feeding frenzy. He's endorsed his Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic Party's presidential nominee. In a letter posted on X, President Biden said, quote, "While it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term," end quote. President Biden further said he would address the nation later this week. The Democrat bowed out after a disastrous debate with former President Donald Trump last month, followed by mounting calls from Democratic lawmakers and donors pushing for him to exit the race amid growing concerns and questions surrounding his fitness to serve a second term. And even his strongest allies, including former President Barack Obama, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer reportedly urged the president to end his re-election bid behind closed doors. Now, the president has done what no other incumbent has done since 1968, exiting the race with only months to go before voters head to the polls. In 1968, Democratic President Lyndon B. Johnson dropped out of the race just 7 months before the election. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, who was formally nominated as the Republican Party's presidential candidate just last week, doubled down on his attacks on the president, saying Biden would go down as the single worst president by far in the history of the United States. He also claimed that Vice President Harris would be an easier target for him to defeat than Joe Biden would have been. Meanwhile, Vice President Harris has said she is honored to receive President Biden's endorsement and has promised to earn and win the nomination at the Democratic National Convention next month. Notably, Kamala Harris could be the first woman of color to lead the ticket of a major political party in the United States. For more on all of this and what it means, I'm joined by political analyst Spencer Critchley, live from California. Spencer, thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you so much for getting up so early to talk to us about what's happening right here in Washington. Give us your initial thoughts on President Biden's exit from the race.
Well, my first thought is that it really is an act of devotion to public service of the kind that has characterized President Biden's entire career. And I think, as everyone can see, it was an extremely difficult decision for him. And I think perhaps the difficulty that that decision was related to that very same devotion to public service, and also to a personal characteristic that got him to where he was today, which is simply refusing to quit. I think the time finally came, though, when it looked like he needed to merge those two priorities and realized that the best way he could serve the public interest at this point in his career was, in fact, to step aside for Kamala Harris.
Now, while this is certainly, I think, sending shockwaves through the nation and the world that President Biden has decided to exit the race, we've actually seen this story before in 1968, of course, when Lyndon B. Johnson exited the race. And interestingly enough, that same year, we know the Democratic National Convention took place in Chicago, much like the Democratic Convention of this year will be taking place in Chicago. Of course, one hopes that there's not the violence and turmoil that we saw in 1968. But can the Democratic Party turn their fortunes around, or do you think history will actually repeat itself here?
I don't think so. And the parallels between President Biden and President Johnson are quite significant, including their records of accomplishment and then their principal decisions to step aside. I've been struck, as I think many observers have been struck, by the rapidity with which the Democratic Party and their erstwhile Republican allies who support the Democratic ticket this time because of their alarm over the prospect of another Trump presidency. I've been struck by the rapidity with which Democrats have unified behind Vice President Harris. It's clear, I think, that everybody involved, including potential competitors for the presidency on the Democratic side, realize that she's a very strong candidate, and given the timing, it makes no sense to step forward and try to compete against her. And instead, we're seeing, I think, all of her potential competitors coming out and endorsing her candidacy, which is not official yet, of course, but I think we can expect it to become official at the convention.
Yeah, it does seem that she's actually finding her voice, especially on the campaign trail with issues like women's reproductive rights. Spencer Critchley, thank you so much for being with us today, especially, and we want to thank you for getting up so early from where you are in California. That's U.S. political analyst Spencer Critchley, who's joining us from California to talk about this bombshell news report today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Across continents, one powerful news source.
Bringing you diverse perspectives on the issues that matter.
We go beyond the boundaries to give you that little extra about every sporting moment. So thank you for making Firstpost 5 million strong. We're counting on your support, and you can trust us to bring you the news unfiltered and unvarnished.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity, one tree for Mother Earth, one tree for our future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
On this today, the T20 World Cup bandwagon has moved across to the West Indies. What can you expect from this?
Hello, I'm Alison Green, coming to you from Durban, South Africa. Today we have a special show.
Start with a report on India's shifting nuclear posture. The first time since India officially became a nuclear power.
Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Aaron Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital,